worship, so they said, the great ones who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies had told their secrets in dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world, until the time where the great priest Cthulhu, from his dark house in the mighty city of Rulia under the waters, should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Someday he would call, when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him.
You know, there is something interesting about Lovecraftian horror stories. The idea that humanity is just a small drop in a vast ocean of intelligent life. That there is something out there more powerful than we could ever imagine. Something so complex that even the smartest scientists in the world can't explain it. And those who try start to lose their bearing on life before even scratching the surface of this entity, or even what this entity wants. Can it be here for peaceful purposes? Or will it bring forth the destruction of all mankind? Something that can't be stopped because it is impossible to understand. Something that will bring the inevitable downfall of all life on this planet. Something that... Wait, what's going on? Oh, can't be.
Nintendo has always been known for releasing high-quality, yet mostly family-friendly video games. From brightly colored platforming games like Mario and Kirby, to fantasy adventure games like Zelda and Fire Emblem.
So the last thing that anyone would expect from Nintendo would be a horror game. Now, that's more of a parody of horror games. No, I'm thinking about something much more dark and mature. Close, but even then, that was rated T for teen. No, I am talking about Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem.
Eternal Darkness was an early GameCube game that was originally developed for the Nintendo 64, but was then redesigned for the GameCube. It was even planned to be a launch title, but unfortunately delays prevented that from happening. The game was released with positive reviews and even earning awards. But despite all that, the game didn't do well in sales, leading to the cancellation of a follow-up game. Also in 2014, the game's development studio Silicon Knights would declare bankruptcy. But even after all that, this game is still considered a cult classic, even making it to so many lists of the top 10 best Nintendo GameCube games.
But can this 2002 horror game hold up after all these years? Can it still deliver the same scares today as it did back then? Let's find out.
The game opens up with a quote from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven.
Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting.
Which does a pretty good job of setting the game's tone. And then we get this.
Nintendo.
Man, the Luigi's Mansion series is really going in a much darker direction. Hope their risk pays off.
The game truly opens with a narration about a certain book.
Flesh, bone, bound together with the oddest magical incantation. This wretched book is where it all began so long ago.
Huh, I didn't know this was an Evil Dead spin-off.
I am Dr. Edward Roivas. I am a clinical psychologist. I am also dead.
I made this audio recording to warn you not to say the following incantation.
This is not my story, nor even the story of the Roivas family. It is the story of humanity.
And how it went downhill so fast.
Humanity has been on the edge of extinction for 2 millennia.
I know, but no one wants to hear about climate change.
We are introduced to our main character, Alex, who seems to be in the middle of a zombie apocalypse.
And
much like Bounty Hunter, the game thrusts us right into the action without any explanation on how to play.
Remember me, Alex.
However, luckily for us, this is only a dream, and we also see that she sleeps fully clothed, which gives me the impression that she doesn't do any laundry. Anyway, she's awakened by a phone call with some dire news.
There's been an accident with your grandfather.
I'll be on the next flight out.
She arrives at the Roivas family estate in Rhode Island and meets Inspector LaGrasse.
Can we get this over with, please?
Of course. This way.
He shows her the body, or should I say, what's left of it.
Wow. And let me remind you, this is a Nintendo game. Lest of course you forget about that terrifying Nintendo bumper.
I don't understand. Why are you showing me this? Can't you check dental records or something? What is wrong with you?
I'm sorry. It's my job, lady. You're the only living relative, and no, we can't check dental records. There's no head.
So what's exactly stopping you from checking the fingerprints? I mean, the hand looks like it's pretty well intact.
I have never seen anything like this in my 20 years on the force. We have no evidence except for the body, and what's left doesn't say much. We don't have a single clue.
Alex does not accept this.
I'm not leaving Rhode Island until you do. There must be some clue in this old mansion revealing what happened. I want answers.
So do I. I wish I had some.
So, 2 weeks later, Wait, seriously? They didn't find anything after 2 weeks? Whatever. We truly begin the gameplay. The controls have the feel of those old exploratory horror games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. You could use the control stick to move around, and you can examine or interact with certain areas of the environment by pressing the B button whenever the prompt is shown. You also have no control over the camera, like in Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. The background music is also very atmospheric, even though there really isn't much, music to it. I actually feel that this is to the game's benefit. You actually do feel isolated. But after a while of listening to nothing except that slow beat, I suddenly hear this.
Who's there? Who's there? Don't make me use this!
Yeah, hearing that for the first time did cause me to jump a little, thinking that there was something out there that was about to get me. However, I would later learn that this is just part of the soundtrack. Therefore, we would be hearing this sound a lot. Anyway, after exploring the mansion and examining different areas and objects, I suddenly found a secret passage. However, instead of finding a woman trapped inside a crystal ball, we find the Tomb of Eternal Darkness, in all its flesh-covered glory. However, when she tries to read the book, she is suddenly treated to a bunch of scary visions. Normally, this would turn someone away from reading the book, but seeing that this is the only clue she has regarding her grandfather's death, she decides to press on.
As you read this, you will come to learn fear as I have. You too will come to understand, or you will perish.
Our first chapter takes place in ancient Persia in the year 26 BC. Here we are introduced to a centurion named Augustus. He is on a quest to retrieve a certain artifact for his emperor. However, on this quest, he suddenly hears some strange voices. He follows these voices to a bunch of desolate pillars, when suddenly... And now we take control of Augustus as he explores this mysterious temple. And during this exploration, he comes across these guys. This gives us a chance to test out the game's combat mechanics. But more details on that later. We are also given a taste of the game's puzzle-solving mechanics.
Luckily, we don't have to push any boxes, and that's good because I had enough of that from the last game.
In this case, we need to search the temple for some cubes, and bring them back here in order to progress. Sounds simple enough, although later puzzles will definitely get hard. And if Soon enough, at the end of the chapter, we come across a room with 3 artifacts. And all you need to do is choose one of them. Here is the game's most important moment, because which one you choose affects the rest of the game. Sort of.
Now, to put it bluntly, this can be considered the game's difficulty setting. But it's not as simple as you might think.
I'll go into more details about that later. Although, no matter which artifact you choose, the immediate result is...
You see, this is why you don't touch things on pedestals, because something bad always happens. Not bad, but I bet I can make this scene even better. Now that's what I'm talking about.
Luckily, the artifact he chose does more than just turn him into a Celtic zombie person. It has also merged his soul with that of a demon, granting him immense power.
Face me, and you shall surely perish.
And thus we conclude our first chapter. It turns out that some of the pages from the book are missing, so we need to search the mansion in order to find some of those missing pages. And once we find one of these pages, we then go to the perspective of a completely different character in a completely different time period, and we see what kind of strange and dark events unfold for them. Examples include a Persian swordsman who is searching for a treasure so he can impress a shallow, snobby girl, as well as a 15th century monk who is framed for murder and is trying to solve the mystery of who the real killer is, but instead uncovers a dark conspiracy. And each of the stories is connected to each other in some way. Sometimes the events of a person's story can lead to the consequences of another person's story. Sometimes you revisit locations that other characters have visited. It's an interesting storytelling mechanic that we don't usually see in video games that often. As you go through these characters' stories, they will run into monsters. Monsters that are so ugly that even looking at them can cause you to go insane. Anyway, we need to find some way to combat these monstrosities. Luckily, your character is able to come across an assortment of melee weapons, firearms, and other types of items that can help you against these creatures. However, while some characters start out with a selection of weapons, other characters need to find them themselves. In either case, you still need to equip your weapons, which you can do by using the inventory menu on the pause screen. Once you equip the weapon, you can then attack the monsters by using the A button. Sounds simple enough, but there are a few things that you need to remember. First, when using a melee weapon like a sword or an axe, you need to make sure you have enough room to swing, or else you will find yourself hitting a wall. The other type is the ranged weapons, like firearms, blowguns, or any other weapon that allows you to attack from a distance. However, the use of these weapons are only limited to the amount of ammo that you have, which is either the amount of ammo you automatically start each level with, or from the amount of extra ammo that you can find throughout the level. So it's best to use them sparingly, and some of these weapons, like guns or crossbows, can only use a limited amount of ammo at a time. Once they run empty, then you'll need to manually reload it by pressing the B button, which can lead you open to attack. Also, you can only equip one weapon at a time, so if you want to switch to a different weapon, you'll have to go to the pause menu and equip the other weapon, which could take you out of the action. Also, a lot of characters need to carry a torch, so if you want to use the torch to light up the areas around you, and believe me, you will, you'll have to manually equip the torch as you would any other weapon. Which means that if you need to attack a monster, you're most likely going to have to do that in almost complete darkness. Although to be fair, the torch can be handy in getting rid of some weaker foes. Also, as a side note, I really love this inventory screen, because after you select an object and check its description, it'll then tumble itself back into place. It's just so adorable. Whee! Oh yeah, one more thing I forgot to mention. It's not enough just to hit the monster, you also need to know exactly where to hit them. Holding the L trigger will cause you to stop and lock on to an enemy. Then you could use the control stick to highlight certain portions of the monster, therefore enabling you to attack that specific area. This can allow you to figure out where exactly you need to hit for maximum damage. It's an interesting game mechanic, discouraging people who just attack someone with no major strategy, and therefore wasting precious ammunition that you can't get back. Character has 3 meters. The red one is the standard health meter, going down whenever you receive damage. The blue meter I'll get back to in a bit. But the green meter, that is the Sanity meter. Hence the title of the game.
Yeah, remember when I told you that just looking at these monsters can make you go insane? That wasn't a joke.
Anytime a monster looks at you, the sanity meter decreases, and in turn causes the character to become paranoid. And that paranoia can cause some really strange effects on the environment. It starts with a slight tilting of the camera. Then you start hearing strange noises, like knocking on doors. Even the character starts to mumble about what's going on. And as the meter keeps decreasing, the characters start to lose their grip on reality and begin to hallucinate. They see blood dripping from the walls and ceiling, and statues going all Haunted Mansion on them. And when the meter gets way too low, they find themselves on the edge of insanity. The music gets more intense, the eerie and disheartening sounds are starting to surround them, and then...
Well, apparently losing all your sanity causes you to explode. Oh no. Wait, what just happened?
Yep, it's not enough for the character to go insane, but the player needs to go crazy as well. Make them question what is real and what is not. Sometimes it can be as simple as turning the entire room upside down, have a character sink into the floor, or it can get...
Wait, who turned off the TV?
No! This isn't really happening!
Yup, that's right. This is a game that can break the fourth wall. Here are a few examples.
Deep into that
Game just
darkness.
reset.
This can't be happening!
Is it really happening?
And possibly the most famous...
No. You can't delete everything. No, I got so far I can't start over again. No! You even deleted my other
This isn't really happening!
Yeah, you get it. Anyway, these events can come out of nowhere and interrupt your gameplay. And while these can be shocking at first, over time, you can get used to it. Although admittedly, it can still find ways to surprise you. Now if you were to run out of sanity, then when an enemy looks at you, it'll start taking away health instead. So it might be a good idea to find a way to restore your sanity. The most common way is to perform finishing moves. After you defeat an enemy, you can perform one of these moves by pressing the B button. However, if you wait too long to perform the finishing move, then the monster vanishes without even giving you the chance. Which can happen when you find yourself surrounded by monsters all wanting to kill you. Another way to restore sanity is by going through the Trapper dimension. As you'll explore these corridors, you'll run into these scorpion-like creatures called Trappers. Once they attack, they send you to their Trapper dimension. Here, you'll find yourself in front of a circle flashing 4 different colors. Then, depending on the color of the circle, it'll teleport you to a different area of the room where you can replenish one of your 3 meters. And if you step on the circle while it's purple, then it'll teleport you straight to the exit. However, this place also has monsters, which can make this a high-risk, high-reward area. Also, once you stand on the circle, you can't change your mind, so you have to be sure you choose carefully. And if you don't want to go to the Trapper dimension, then you can just kill them with a projectile weapon, or since they only react to sound, you can try and sneak past them.
Man, all this talk about Trapper dimensions and finishing moves just to restore some health and sanity seemed like a lot of trouble. If only there was some easier way to do that.
So by now, I bet you're wondering, what is the deal with the blue meter? Well, that represents your magic.
With a K, of course.
Well, technically it's a CK, but yeah. Anyway, this allows you to cast spells. You need to find these scrolls that have the spells on them, but you can only cast them if you have the right runes. which can mostly be found in specific enemies with clear torsos. But it's not enough to just have the runes, because, well, we don't know exactly what these runes mean. So you also need to find these tablets that have the runes inscripted on them. And after all that, we are finally able to learn the spell. Now, how exactly do you cast these spells? Well, first you need to go to the spell page inside your pause menu. Then you choose the scroll with the spell you want to cast. Then you choose one of the 3 colored runes that represent the demons in the beginning of the game. And then you cast your spell, which has this really cool effect with the demon reading out each rune before it casts the spell. And there are a lot of different spells you can cast, like magic attacks, enchanting items, and even restoring your health and sanity. And if you don't want to go into the pause menu each time, you can assign a specific spell to a button on your controller. Now each time you cast a spell, it uses magic points, so you have to be sure you choose carefully or else you'll waste them. Also, when casting a spell, you need to stand perfectly still while the runes are being called out, because if you move from that spot, then the spell will not work and you just wasted magic points. Luckily, your magic points can regenerate over time, especially when your character is walking, which allows me to use the strategy where I leave the room whenever I get close to death, then walk around for a few minutes, and then use my magic to heal myself and gain protection, and then go back into the room where the monster is, and then attack him until I get close to death again, and then leave the room and walk around, and you kinda get the idea.
Some may call this cheating, but I call it a legitimate strategy.
As you continue through the game, you'll gain ability to cast even powerful versions of your spells, although they require you to use more runes. Therefore, you will need more time to cast the spell. While each level keeps jumping to different time periods, I feel like the narrative is actually decent to follow. Augustus is preparing a ritual to release the demon that was inside the artifact you chose, although the motivation for each demon is exactly the same.
I'm afraid from now on, it's just death, death, and more death.
While the story may seem pretty simple at first, what makes it interesting is that we see the events unfold through the perspective of the different characters. Whether by choice, or from just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, they either witness or become directly involved in the events that tie into the coming eternal darkness. As we play as these characters, we spend enough time to get their personality traits, but a good number of them are not really that interesting. Though to be fair, even the best horror movies have characters that are not that deep. And just because some of the characters are not interesting does not mean they're unlikable. I even enjoy Augustus and his villainous, over-the-top personality.
With this sacrifice of souls I make unto thee, Great One, the gate shall be ready to be opened, and your freedom shall be at hand.
Since you play as different characters, each of them have their own different play styles, whether it be walking speeds, health points, or the amount of time it takes for them to tire out from running. Also, some of the characters use and carry different objects to help them. Some of these can restore health or sanity, while others are used to interact with the environment. For example, Dr. Edwin Lindsay can use a brush to uncover objects hidden underneath cobwebs, and Maximilian Roivas can use his medical journal to perform autopsies on defeated enemies, and you can look at his findings in the pause menu, and they are very entertaining to listen to.
Welcome the oblivion of ignorance, for to have knowledge is to be damned.
You heard him! Knowledge only leads to eternal damnation. Therefore, the only logical course of action would be to skip school and turn to a life of video games! Wait.
Joking aside, the game takes itself very seriously, and that's to be expected out of a horror game. And while I may laugh at certain moments of over-the-top voice acting,
they're all dead!
And cringe at seeing characters move in a completely unhuman-like way. That being said, it is not enough to cause me to lose interest in the story, and I am able to suspend my disbelief when it comes to those unintentionally silly moments.
This is usually the time where I talk about the boss battles. But with this game, there really isn't much to say.
I mean, sure, there are monsters that appear at the end of certain levels that can be considered bosses, but they would appear as regular enemies as you continue throughout the game. The only one I would consider a boss would be the Guardian of the Cathedral. And even then, the fight has different mechanics depending on which artifact you choose, so it's never the same boss fight. In fact, the entire gameplay is slightly different from each artifact, hence why that moment can be considered the difficulty setting, although the story is mostly the same.
And now we come to the end of the game, or at the very least, the end of one of the difficulty settings. If you don't want any spoilers, I'll leave a timer at the bottom of the video.
Near the end of the game, we discover that the remaining artifacts have made it to the mansion, and that underneath the mansion is a ruined underground city. In the center of the city is this giant device that was designed to amplify magic. And since Augustus is almost ready to summon his demon, we have to summon our own demon that is stronger than his. But of course, as expected in ancient underground civilizations, they can't make something without having it be convoluted. So we have to manually input the symbols into the device in order to summon the demon. But once we select the slot, we get teleported to the top of one of the different spires. There, we can put in the symbol. And after that, we get teleported to a different location in the city. So we have to make it all the way back to the spire, fighting monsters along the way, and then repeat the process over and over until you complete the spell, which is a total number of 8 times. And after all that, we have our final confrontation with Augustus.
Ah, Miss Rivers, you're just in time. You will now have the honor of becoming the first morsel for my Lady Zelatoth. An appetizer for the banquet your race shall provide.
And don't get me started on what I have planned for dessert.
The human race will never go quietly into the darkness.
You got that right. In fact, I'm gonna light this place up so hard that no darkness is going to come for me!
This is the end!
The end indeed!
Augustus now summons his demon, but luckily at the same time, our demon gets summoned as well. And while that demon goes on a fight against his, we need to deal with this Skeletor ripoff. We quickly discover that this spooky, scary skeleton will not let us send shivers down its spine, no matter how many times we try. Like Jafar from Kingdom Hearts, we need to attack something else in order to do any damage. But hitting that artifact is not enough. We need to enchant this sword with the power of the demon that we have summoned. After we damage the artifact a few times, we start the next phase. And this is actually pretty clever. You start calling upon the spirits of the playable characters who died at the end of their stories so they can finally get revenge on this creep. You need to keep hitting the artifacts with all the ghosts and finally shatter that toy that has caused these people all this trouble. Yeah, that's what you get for making this guy's head explode. Now with the artifact destroyed, we can finally defeat this bony bastard. Go ahead, cast your magical lightning spells. I'm as fast as Sonic the Hedgehog. It doesn't matter if you get me, I can heal myself as many times I want. Oh sure, teleport around the stage all you want. You're only delaying the inevitable beatdown that you deserve. Now go, join your demon in the depths of hell where you belong. With Augustus defeated and our demon literally tearing his demon apart, we suddenly realize we have a much bigger problem on our hands.
What have I done?
But luckily, the ghost of Alex's grandfather appears to save the day, altering the spell amplifier, dragging your demon back into the dimension from whence it came.
It is finally over, my dear. The Ancients' plans are finished. For now, at least. I'm sorry it had to be like this. But there was so little time, and so much to do.
Admittedly, mostly just reading from a cursed book, but there was still much to do. Playing that piano was essential.
Goodbye, Alex. I will miss you.
As quickly as it began, it ended. To think that once I could not see beyond the veil of reality, I was once a fool.
but what are you going to do with the book now? Hey, I know! Let's hide it in a secluded cabin in the woods! I'm sure no one ever goes there anymore! Especially teenagers.
And now that we beat the game, we can replay it, but this time choose a different artifact, which in turn can bring us new creatures with different strategies on how to beat them, and also give us a chance to find the game's hidden secrets.
But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, this game is a classic that still holds up today, even if some of the mechanics are pretty dated.
The game definitely deserves to be on the list of top 10 GameCube games. There's some great storytelling elements, the atmosphere is great, the designs of the creatures are pretty creative, and it does deliver some really good scares. Sure, some of the sanity effects aren't as effective as they were back then, and there are mechanics that I feel could have been expanded upon. Also, the dark areas can get pretty annoying, and aside from Alex, most of the characters are not really that interesting. And not to mention those moments of hilarious over-the-top voice acting.
What do you mean?
But despite its flaws, it accomplished what it set out to do, and that was to create a great horror game. So if you have the hankering for some old 2002 scares, dust off your old GameCube and get lost in the eternal darkness.
I'm the Redshirt Reviewer, and thanks for